It is well known that the Nile River Basin is a shared water resources, transboundary waters shared by 10 countries. That is Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, DRC, Congo, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia and Eritrea. And by that, the best way today how to manage a shared water resources is to have cooperation, is through cooperation. And you can only be able to cooperate effectively when you know the rules of the game, when you know your rights and you know your obligations. What are my rights with regard to these shared waters, all these transboundary waters that Kenya shared with other countries as the Nile River Basin? So with that, all along from colonial times, Kenya, attained independence in 1963. Prior to that, there have been other arrangements which are actually not being palatable to the East African countries, especially Kenya. When we attained independence, we found those other colonial agreements were not actually very friendly and could not allow us to be able to develop. So what do we do as now, why I'm being appointed by the Kenya as a chief negotiator? We want to come up with a new agreement that will provide rights and obligation all of the riverian states to allow a peaceful and sustainable management and development of the Nile River Basin water resources. So what do we do? We look at how would Kenya want to use the water resources of the Nile River Basin. Kenya forms the upper headworks of the Nile River Basin, actually the White Nile, that the Lake Victoria is the main chief. And to that, Kenya contributes almost like 40% of the water that flows into the Lake Victoria. So we have a big share. So we must be able to know what our right if we want to develop the water resources of the Nile. So as a chief negotiators, I want to put the Kenyan case on the table, that Kenya would want to utilize the waters that feeds the Lake Victoria that emanates from the Kenyan territories. At the same time, we know that there are other riparian states, including Uganda, Sudan, DRC, Congo, Rwanda, and Egypt also would want to use the same water. So once we know our limit, to what extent can we be able to use the water without affecting other nations, then we can go ahead and even ask our development partners. This is a case where we want to utilize the shared water resources, and we have been allowed to use it to this limit. Today, there is no clear boundary as to where Kenya can use the shared water resources, especially the waters of the River Nile, and beyond that, they will actually start affecting other countries. So these are what we are negotiating, actually to get a clear share of the Kenyan, that to this effect, to this much, to this amount of water, you can be able to develop and use without affecting other riparian states. Today, Egypt uses the highest amount of water. They have been stating it very clearly that they are using up to 54.5 billion cubic meters annually, out of a total potential of waters from the Nile annually of 90 billion. So if they're using almost over 60% of the waters of the Nile, so by that simple arithmetic, they are already taking the lion's share. This is what the other country says. Okay, we are not, Egypt actually is more developed than the other riparian states of the Nile, maybe by the virtue of how they started the development, and also they had no any other single source. So they must be able to utilize the water of the Nile fully to develop. But the other country feels that by definition, they are actually taking a more lion's shares than other states. And other states have also found that they can no longer rely on the rain-fed kind of agriculture. They want also to turn to irrigated agriculture. And turning into irrigated agriculture, you must use the shared water resources within your territories. This is also what is coming out to be very clear. There is need for us to relook into how we are using the shared water so that each and every country can be able to use their equitable share, reasonable, based on their needs, based on any other sources, and actually not to affect other riparian states. Kenya, by definition, is a water-scarce country. If you look at 80% of the Kenyan territory falls within the arid and semi-arid lands. It is only in the western part and a bit of the central. Actually, the entire western part, which harbours 50% of the Kenyan populations, are within the Nile Basin, drainage basin. And that alone tells you, and that basin has got 54% of Kenya's water resources. So if Kenya is a water scarce country, actually our total endowment of water annually is about only 21 billion cubic meters. Within the basin, there is over about 14 billion. So for Kenya actually to be able to sustain and get out of the water scarcity, we must be able to sustainably develop the water within the Nile basin, actually Lake Victoria basin, which forms the upper headworks of the Nile basin. Kenya has got a massive program actually of what we call the water storage. We want to be, because like now, even at this time that we talk, there is a lot of rain that is falling within almost all parts of the Kenyan territory. But that will not last long. After 3 months, Kenya will go back to aridity. We shall go back to the drought, and you see how the drought affected us last year. So what are we saying now? We want to increase our water storage. Today, our water storage per capita is only about 5 cubic meter per capita, while other countries, like even in Egypt, is much, much more than that. So what are we saying? We want to be able to harvest some flows, store them, and use them during the dry season. Okay. With regard to the existing arrangement or existing agreement on the Nile River Basin, there are two clear legal instruments. One is 1929 agreement, which was signed between the Republic of Egypt and United Kingdom on behalf on the countries which were under their administration by that time. Those countries were mainly Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, while you know the other countries like Rwanda, Burundi were under the French territory. But with regard to that kind of agreement of 1929, if you read it, if I may give you Article 14D of 1929 agreement, it states very clearly that no states shall be able to utilize the Nile River waters or the rivers feeding the Niles or the lakes which feeds the River Nile without the approval of the Egyptians, of the Egyptian government. That alone gives veto to Egypt over other riparian states. Now, when Kenya attained independence in 1963, Kenya followed the Nyerere doctrine on a clean slate, that we would not want to be a party to any colonial agreement so long as they are not renegotiated. And actually, the Kenya, having attained independence in 1963, attained the legal status and became a sovereign country and a legal entity that is allowed to freely negotiate any agreement that he wants to be a party. If you look at the Vienna Convention of 1978 on the doctrine of a clean slate, it states very clear that a newborn state has got no obligation to be bound by colonial agreement so long as it does not want to be a party to it. So Kenya stated very clearly that it is not going to be a party to such agreement as 1929. Look at the other legal instrument, 1959, between Egypt and Sudan, what they call the exclusive utilization of the water resources, where two countries sit down, like we are sitting now, and agree to share the entire waters themselves, closing the eyes that other states also exist on the Nile. Where the 1959 Egypt and Sudan agreed to share the entire waters of the Nile with regard to any other state that exists, and knowing very well that this water that they want share equally within the two countries actually emanates from other riparian states. As you know, the Nile, 20% of the water resources of the Nile, if you take the average, come from the White Nile, while 80% or 75% come from the Blue Nile, which is Ethiopia and Eritrea. And how come two other downstream countries just sit and say, there is no any other countries, we want to share it 100%. So this is the ball of contention. The other issue which is at stake today is about existing uses. We have come up with what we are calling the water security, a provision on water security, actually Article 14. And within Article 14, all the states have agreed that, yes, we want to ensure all the states has got their water security with regard to the water resources of the Nile River Basin. But with that, the ball of contention is that Egypt and Sudan would want a provision, actually we call it Article 14B, on the draft cooperative framework, that gives them, embeds the existing uses, which they say they are already using 54.5 billion cubic meters per year. Sudan is already using 18.5 billion cubic. See, if you had the two, you are almost over 70 billion cubic meters for the two countries out of the 90 billion. What other state will be able to use is what we wonder. Egypt and Sudan wanted us to agree on what they call their historical rights. What is historical right under the international law is not understood. There is no provision from 1966 Helsinki Rules to the 1997 the UN Convention on the Water Coast. There is no mention of historical rights. Within the Nile River Basin, there are other 7 countries, including Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, DRC Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, and Ethiopia, which have agreed fully to the already draft cooperative framework. And they are ready to sign it even today so that it can be enforced and we start utilizing it. So it is only that is actually what has made from time to time when we go to negotiations, if this Sudan and Egypt fails, their need of actually entrenching their existing use of 54.5 cubic meters and actually recognizing their historical rights is not being adhered to, they walk out of the negotiation. But all the time they walk out, but they still come back because there is no any other source that they can be able to use. And what we have been telling them, the only simple way is cooperation, and where we can get that cooperation is to finalize the cooperative agreement, sign it, and have it in force. I think even in marriage, if the husband and wife cannot be able to talk, then there will be no cooperation in that house. If one runs away, the night will come and one will still have to come back, and they will have to have a table to sit and negotiate and to see what is the problem. So that has been, sometimes you hear they have walked out, but they have always been coming back, because we also believe, they also know, we can only achieve a peaceful and sustainable management of the Nile River Basin if we have a cooperative agreement and we negotiate on a table. I've been a registered water rights in Kenya for over 20 years. And there are countries, especially in the Meru, on the Tana River Basin, that actually are upstream. And they always say that we always favor the people who are downstream of the River Tana. But even with that our favor, and the water comes from them before it reaches those people, they have a chance to first to utilize the water before the water goes to the downstream. And if we feel that we want to favor them, and they know they have got instrument how they can be able to pollute that water, so they have even been making a joke that if we stop them from using that water, they will be making that every morning they pee in the water and those people are only drinking their urine. So, but what we are saying, walking out of a negotiation table and not to come out with an agreement, what does it mean? Will it stop the water from coming from upstream countries? The water still will come from upstream countries, and there is no, and a good example that we have been giving them, if a farmer in Kenya is grazing his cattle, 1,000 cattle, along a river feeding the Nile Basin, can he be able to convince those cattle, this water belongs to Egypt, let's cross it and you will go and drink another water and they are thirsty? If they have got that means for us to convince our cows, we have no problem. Another things that they have been saying is that we have got rain, and rain is a part of the Nile River. It has already been raining on us, so we have already utilized our share. How can we be able to utilize rain to generate electricity? Hydropower. It's not possible. If they have a clear technology, how we can be able to do, they can also be able to help us see that on the negotiation table, which they have not been able. And two, rain-fed agriculture is unreliable. It is as what has made the other riparian state to be more poor and not to have food security. What we are saying, let us just have that our share, that when it has rained, it goes to the rivers where you can be able to control it, hold it a bit, utilize, to irrigate, and then produce food the same way they are doing. So to us, we think they will not be able to get out of the negotiation because they have got no any other alternative. And war, because it is by definition it's war, you don't know who will win. So why would you prefer something you are not sure of its outcome rather than something on the negotiation table which you are sure of its outcome? Because you can still talk. You know, in war you don't talk. And not automatically. And you know, there is no country which is so powerful on the Nile Basin than the others. Countries are developing. You can see we have discovered oil in Uganda, which is one of the riparian states. We have discovered oil in Ethiopia. We have discovered gas in Tanzania. These countries will develop and will reach the development status of other riparian states, which think that they are developed. What will happen by then? I think the best thing from the onset now, we look at a better way on how to be able to cooperate, but not thinking at the powers that we have. So it's a clear message. It's not by might or by power, but by cooperation on the Nile River Basin that will bring a peaceful and sustainable management of the Nile River Basin resources. I believe there will be peace in the Nile. Nobody, no country will be able to afford war on the Nile. Because first, water is life, and we need, all the countries need these resources. And we all need to cooperate on how best we can be able to utilize. And I see a very bright future for the Nile Basin, and we are actually going to establish a Nile River Basin Commission, where I'm seeing all the countries will be able to join, even if not all join now, but in the long run, not more than 5 to 10 years, all countries will be able to be there, because it is going to be the forum which shall be able to clear new projects, to be able to see, act as a forum for cooperation, act for a forum for dispute resolutions. So no countries would want to be out of if you are within the Nile Basin, because there is no any other source. So I see a very bright future, and I've listened to all the riparian states for the last 10 years. It is very clear all the countries want to join that cooperation.